Video game movies are, as a rule, pretty terrible. Bad acting, special effects, plot lines, and directing are all commonplace in the genre, especially if our mortal nemesis Uwe Boll is anywhere near a project. However, Hollywood has shown us time and time again that just because a movie is bad, that doesn't mean it's not profitable. That philosophy applies to video game movies too. Because they're based on big franchises with recognizable characters, unsuspecting cinemagoers flock to see these films in droves, not knowing what horrors they are about to endure. Also, a lot of video game movies are aimed at kids who drain money faster than a turbo-powered leech. For today's list, we're looking at the video game movies that made the most money of all. We're only counting films based on real-world games, and we're not accepting movies that simply feature characters from games. So, no Ready Player One or Wreck-It Ralph here, I'm afraid. With that nice and clear, get your overpriced popcorn ready, because I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 highest-grossing video game movies of all time. Number 10. Resident Evil Afterlife. Edging out the first Tomb Raider movie to take the number 10 spot on this list is the fourth film based on survival horror juggernaut Resident Evil. Resident Evil Afterlife sees Mila Jovovich return as Alice to once again do battle with the evil Umbrella Corporation. The film was written and directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, who also wrote the first 3 Resi films and is married to Mila Jovovich. I'm sure that had absolutely nothing to do with how she got the starring role, though. Afterlife doesn't really follow the plot of any of the Resident Evil games, but does feature a lot of characters from the series. Jill Valentine is in it, Albert Wesker is the villain, and Chris Redfield makes his first movie appearance played by Prison Break star Wentworth Miller. Yes, his real first name is Wentworth. At least if the acting career doesn't pan out, he can always moonlight as a butler. Despite making a buttload of cash, Afterlife was not well received by critics. It stands at just 21% on Rotten Tomatoes, with one critic comparing it to Watching Paint Dry. Still, it did win the Golden Reel at the 2010 Genie Awards. I don't really know what those are though, so let's move on. Number 9. Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. We come now to yet another Resident Evil movie, and this is the last one, we promise. We'd like to assure you that we haven't married Paul W.S. Anderson and Mila Jovovich in secret, and they're certainly not sponsoring this list. If only. The husband-wife duo return in their roles as writer, director, and star, respectively, for 2017's Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. In this installment of the series, Alice and her fellow survivors attempt to release an airborne cure for the apocalypse-causing T-virus. The film slightly outperformed its predecessor, coming in at 37% on Rotten Tomatoes instead of 21%. However, there was significant controversy surrounding its production, as one of Jovovich's stunt doubles was seriously injured in a stunt gone wrong, and another crew member died in an on-set accident. The $312 million made by this movie does make it the highest grossing in the series, but no amount of revenue can erase the tragedies that occurred during its creation. Perhaps it's a good thing that this was the final entry in the franchise. Well, unless you count 2021's Welcome to Raccoon City or that dreadful Netflix series. And let's face it, we'd all rather forget those, wouldn't we? Number 8. Sonic the Hedgehog. After much teeth-based criticism, the Sonic the Hedgehog movie burst onto our screens in February 2020, right before the horrible thing that shall not be named really got underway and forced most of the world to stay at home and out of cinemas. The idea of a Sonic movie has been around since the 1990s, with several projects ending up in development hell, but thanks to Paramount Pictures and Chums, audiences around the world finally got to see their favourite blue blur do battle against Dr. Robotnik on the big screen. And it was fine. The plot is decent, and Jim Carrey is always a delight, but Sonic himself is really rather annoying, and he flosses far too much. Once, but that's enough. Basing a film on one of the most popular gaming franchises of all time was a smart move, as the movie drew the highest opening weekend box office for a video game movie ever in the United States. It was also the 6th highest grossing film of 2020, but again, the thing. It may not be every gamer's cup of tea, but Sonic the Hedgehog introduced a new set of fans to the character and was successful enough to get itself a sequel, which we'll get to in good time. Number 7. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. At one point, this adaptation of the 2003 title of the same name was the highest-grossing video game movie ever made, and it's not hard to see why. The film has an all-star cast with Jake Gyllenhaal playing the titular prince, and Ben Kingsley, Alfred Molina, and Gemma Arterton taking on supporting roles. Borrowing elements from across the Prince of Persia reboot series, Sands of Time follows Prince Dastan as he tries to stop the world from being destroyed by a dagger that has magical sand inside. Make sure you check that magical sand for cat poop, Your Majesty. Our writer was never able to trust his childhood sandpit again after the incident. Anyway, I digress. Sands of Time might have made a killing at the box office, but it failed to capture the public's imagination. Originally set up to be the first in a new franchise touted as the next Pirates of the Caribbean, plans for a sequel were cancelled and the IP has laid dormant ever since. It may have had something to do with the fact that none of the actors in the movie are actually Persian, which is, problematic to say the least. And why do they all have English accents? Jake Gyllenhaal isn't even English. I'm so confused. Number 6. The Angry Birds movie. Look, as much as we dunk on them on this channel, mobile games are video games too. They might be, for the most part, lower quality, mind-numbing, cash-grabbing video games, but they are still video games nonetheless. Adapted from the stupidly successful mobile title published by Rovio Entertainment, the Angry Birds movie follows one of the birds, Red, as he leads a group of his feathered friends against an army of invading pigs. The filmmakers were up against it from the start. There really isn't much plot to be mined from a game about slinging budgies at wooden structures, but they managed to come up with one, and all things considered, it's not too bad. Starring the likes of Jason Sudeikis, Peter Dinklage, and Sean Penn, the Angry Birds movie drew big bucks at the cinema, finishing #1 at the US box office over its opening weekend. It's also the most successful Finnish-produced film of all time, which just makes me a bit sad for Finland's film industry, to tell you the truth. Although the film sequel didn't do as well, the original Angry Birds movie was definitely an overachiever, and this is probably the only time you'll hear us mention Angry Birds on one of our lists. Number 5. Uncharted. The production process for a film adaptation of the Uncharted games took so long that Mark Wahlberg, who was originally signed on to play young hero Nathan Drake, ended up playing the role of Drake's older mentor, Victor Sully Sullivan, instead. In his place, Tom Holland ended up getting the role of Drake for this action-adventure romp that loosely follows the events of the games. The film sees Drake and Sully heading out on a quest to stop a crooked billionaire from tracking down the lost treasure of explorer Ferdinand Magellan, but it's the movie's real-life booty that we're interested in. Raking in over $400 million worldwide, Uncharted was a certified hit when it finally made it into cinemas in February of 2022. Topping the US box office for 2 straight weeks, it was one of the first big post-Thing film announcements and helped coax people out of their homes and back into cinemas. Sadly, it was a bit rubbish. Critics called it derivative and labelled it as a weak adaptation of its source material. Maybe these issues will be addressed in future films, but we'll probably just end up with more of Tom Holland falling out of planes. Number 4. Sonic the Hedgehog 2. He's back, and he's more profitable and annoying than ever. Just a few weeks after Uncharted hit theaters, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 proved once and for all that people prefer to see animated forest creatures than they do people being shot at in the desert. Thank God that debate's finally settled. Picking up where the first film left off, Sonic is joined by his buddy, Tails, as they race to the Master Chaos Emerald before it falls into the hands of Robotnik and his new sidekick, Knuckles. Jim Carrey and Ben Schwartz reprise their roles as Robotnik and Sonic respectively and are joined by Colleen O'Shaughnessy and Idris Elba. Clearly, that extra star power did wonders for the film's bank account. Taking over $80 million more than its predecessor, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was also a box office topper and broke the previous film's record for the highest grossing opening weekend of any video game flick. Critics were just as pleased with Sonic's second outing, and this movie reviewed about as well as the first one. Praise was leveled at the film's humor, as well as the introduction of more characters from the original games. I just hope we get to see Big the Cat in the next film. Everyone loves that guy. Right? Number 3. Rampage. Starring the world's most muscular man, Dwayne the Dwayneson, Rampage is based on the 1986 arcade game of the same name. In Rampage, the game, which was developed and published by Midway, players take on the role of one of 3 gigantic monsters and are tasked with destroying a city. Those monsters are George, a huge gorilla, Lizzie, a radioactive lizard, and Ralph, a wolf that can walk on its hind legs. Sadly, The Rock didn't wind up playing the giant wolf, which honestly I'd have paid to see, but instead just plays a human, i.e. himself. Rampage is like any other action film you've ever seen with Johnson in it. Fine, but ultimately forgettable. However, also like every other Dwayne Johnson action film, this one made a lot of money. It also garnered a lot of critical praise, becoming the highest rated video game movie in the history of Rotten Tomatoes at the time. Although, considering it sits at just 51% on the site, that says more about other video game adaptations than it does about the quality of Rampage. If you like your action senseless, your heroes ripped, and your animals irradiated and oversized, then this might just be the film for you. Otherwise, it's probably not worth the price of admission. Number 2. Detective Pikachu. Inspired by the Nintendo 3DS game of the same name as well as the world of Pokemon in general, 2019's Detective Pikachu gives a voice to the yellow electric mouse, and that voice just happens to belong to the lovely Ryan Reynolds. The beloved mascot helps out a young man named Tim, played by Justice Smith, as he searches for his missing father. Along the way, they encounter a variety of famous pocket monsters, including Charizard, Psyduck, and a really creepy-looking Mr. Mime. Oh god, get it away! Detective Pikachu was very well liked upon its release, with some calling it the greatest video game movie of all time, though to be fair, that's not saying much. It was praised for its strong characters, funny dialogue, and the way it introduced non-Pokemon fans to the series. It might have only finished second in the movie charts upon its opening, but it still made a lot of money. Considering that it was up against Avengers Endgame that weekend, we can't really be too mad at it. Smith said in 2021 that a sequel to the movie was unlikely, which is a shame as the film definitely had potential for a follow-up. Still, if that means that we never have to see that Mr. Mime ever again, I'm fine with— No, what are you— Take it— Get it off the screen! Number 1. Warcraft. Based on the insanely popular series that gave us World of Warcraft, this 2016 flick edges out Detective Pikachu by fewer than $3 million to take the top spot on this list. Directed by Duncan Jones, who, fun fact, just so happens to be the son of David Bowie, Warcraft follows two warring factions of humans and orcs as they team up to face a greater threat. It's typical fantasy stuff, full of magical creatures, deep lore, and silly-sounding names. One of the orcs is called Orgrim Doomhammer, which is only marginally less ridiculous than Wentworth Miller, but that guy's real, I think. The film went through a troubled production cycle with multiple script, actor, and director changes. At one point, Uwe Boll offered to direct it, which gives me shudders just thinking about it. In the end, the behind-the-scenes chaos may have contributed to the film being slammed by the press. It was called uninspiring and a waste of its director's talent, with many critics coming to the conclusion that the Warcraft games just simply weren't meant for adaptation. But you know what? Who gives a flip? The money made bank, and in the end, isn't that all that matters in life? No, probably not actually.